Welcome to episode number 114 of the Marine Layer podcast. We welcome on friend of the podcast, Jason Churchill, the host of Baseball Things, for a conversation all about the Mariners' 2024 season.
Your reminder before we start the show, make sure to download these episodes. If you're listening, leave us a 5-star review. Make sure to rate and review. And if you're watching on YouTube, like, comment, and subscribe. Hit that big red subscribe button if you're watching. And then check us out on social media too. We're on Instagram, we're on TikTok, along with Twitter and YouTube Shorts at Marine Layer Pod.
Let's get it rolling.
The pitch from Acevedo. A drive deep to right field. Down the line. The Mariners win this game 2-1. The dream lives. They're going to the playoffs. One run from Jansen. There you go. Left field. We got a tie ball game. Julio. Oh, baby, what a moment. Tie ball game is 7-7.
And we welcome you to this episode of the Marine Layer podcast, part of the Just Baseball Podcast Network. Recording here on Monday evening, March 25th, and opening day is just 3 days away as of recording. It'll be 2 days as of the time this podcast comes out. And man, like we did this last year, and it really worked out so well. Where we had Jason Churchill on the episode before opening day came out, or the week of opening day coming out, and we did it again. Just wrapped up the conversation with Jason. I mean, the amount of detail Jason Churchill goes into and talks about baseball is amazing. It's truly amazing. And I framed this at the beginning of the conversation that we have with him. It's so much fun now to see these sort of unique aspects all of us take up in the space of Mariners content and Mariners evaluation and Mariners talk, of how many different roles people can fill. Jason Churchill's content and our content, like, they overlap, but very different styles. And I'm glad he's able to come on and sort of bring that balance a little bit.
I will say, as we talked to him a little about in the interview, I do miss him being on Twitter because for years, I always used to kind of see where Churchill was at with his takes and see where I was at with mine and say, okay, how far off am I on this? Because he's so smart. Like, I think he gets a lot of things right. I think he's very detail oriented and thinks things out a lot. So when you can't have him on Twitter, you can have him on the podcast, which is great. I actually really hope we can kind of make this a yearly tradition where we can now have him on before the start of each season and just kind of shoot him some questions about what are we thinking? What's he thinking? What do we feel like the season's going to look like? What did the off season look like? I mean, it was really fun. We covered a lot. And we can't wait for you guys to hear this conversation because it was a really fun one. It's basically the bulk of the whole show. We talk about Brian Wu in there a little bit. I guess to just preface today's news, or I should say Monday's news. Yeah, he's going to start the year on the IL. It's not ideal. It's a bummer. I wouldn't be overly concerned. All the reports are it's going to be pretty short term. It's probably going to be 1 or 2 starts. I just thought we'd at least mention that before we get to the conversation. But I don't think anybody should be panicking.
Yeah, not overly panicking yet. There are no structural damages. I believe they did do an MRI on his elbow, and everything's fine. So now the concern comes when he ramps back up again. How is he going to feel? Because if he ramps back up again and he can't, then he gets shut down for longer, and then the Mariners actually have an issue. It's like the one of the few things we highlighted at the end of the offseason that we were truly concerned with. So if a guy goes down and now Emerson Hancock is in that role, the next two up are Levi Stout and Austin Voth. So at that point, you might start getting uncomfortable with who's occupying that number 5 starter spot. But as of right now, things are fine. Wu's for the most part, healthy, and he will get back to throwing here in a couple of weeks. So now's the time for Emerson Hancock to come up and to sort of show himself. We saw some velocity in spring. Sure, he might not be totally ready to be a every 5th day starter in the big leagues, but feel like this year he's certainly more prepared than he was last year.
It's a great opportunity for him. And again, the most important thing above everything else is it doesn't seem overly serious. So we thought we'd preface that and talk about that for at least a minute here or two. Before we get to the conversation with Jason Churchill, let's take a quick pause and talk to you about our friends over at Pagotch's Pub 85. That's over in Kirkland. It is the week of opening day, guys. I know you're going to need some spots to watch the game. So go head over there. There's over 20 TVs in the place. You want to go watch March Madness, you can do that too, and watch the Mariners all at the same time and have a great time with your friends. If you go during happy hour, you can get some great drink specials. They're from Monday through Friday from 2 to 6 p.m. It features $3 domestic beers, $4 Manny's Blue Moons, $4 Mac and Jacks, $4 Wells, and $4 house wines. All of that is over at Pagaccia's Pub 85 in Kirkland.
All right, let's get to our conversation now with Jason Churchill. We have Jason Churchill on with us. He's the host of Baseball Things, does a ton of stuff over at Future Star Series. You also have his newsletter, Mariners After Midnight. Jason, thanks so much for taking some time to join us here today. And we're kind of jealous, to be honest. I want to lead this off because you told us last year that you were going to spend less time online in the last calendar year. How was it?
It was great, and I really haven't stopped. Yeah, to be honest with you. Really, I haven't stopped. Like, there's less social media for me, less active social media for me. It's all planned out. A lot of it is scheduled. A lot of it's automated. It's been really great. It's picked up since maybe November. November was pretty slow. I think it was slow for everybody, where you're kind of making up stuff to talk about. It's more about ideas and what if they did this, and what if baseball did this, what if the Mariners did this. But it was nice not to have, something every day to think about. Because, I think the worst thing for me sometimes is I get certain things in my head and it's like, okay, the team is 500 after 30 games and maybe Julio's struggling or something. And it's like, I'm thinking about things like that because people are asking about things like that. People are writing about things like that. I'm thinking about that on my own. And then like something happens, like somebody gets hurt or somebody gets traded. And it's like, I was already thinking about this and now I got to change and I got to think about this. So when the off season comes, that's on steroids because it's all about ideas and everybody has a different idea. And hey, what if this guy let off? What if they sign this guy or traded for this guy? And it's like, I do that on my own. And then you hear everybody else's idea. I hear your guys' ideas. I hear, Ryan Divish's ideas. I hear the radio guys and the TV guys talking. And it was nice to shut that down for a good while. And even though I think the off season, it was a little boring. We got some runs, some signings, and it would die for 2 or 3 weeks. And then we get a signing and it would die. They probably have to do something about that. But it was nice. It was really nice. And I've carried some of that over into the spring a little bit. More of a narrowed focus, I think, and it's really helped. So it's been nice.
Draw the curtain back just a little bit in December. It's like, something's going on here.
You know what? I think I got used to waiting until something actually happened. And I was like, I'm not going to do this speculation thing, constantly in my head as much as I used to. I'm going to wait till something happens. I'm not going to react to rumors. I'm not going to react to ideas as much. I'm going to wait till something happens. Oh, they signed Mitch Garver. Okay, cool. Let's talk about that. Not, oh, Mitch Garver is talking with the M's. Ooh, what could that look like? I'm waiting till he signs, right? So I'm not wasting energy. Because it does feel like when you talk about things that have like no chance to happen, or it's just one of a billion things that could happen, really, it does feel, for me anyway, like I kind of just wasted like an hour on doing a show on, man, they could trade for Jeff McNeil, and then they don't, and they get Polanco instead. And I feel like I should just delete that episode from the feed. I feel like that sometimes. I don't, but I do feel like that. And I guess that's the nature of podcasting and radio, but I've tried to limit that a little bit. So, and focusing on facts as much as possible, reacting to actual news as much as possible has really helped me do that. So it's been good.
I'm feeling a direct shot right at us because back in December, we did a whole show on Reddit reports Shohei may take a 1-year, $65 million deal from the Mariners. Can it happen?
No, I certainly wouldn't call it a shot at anybody because like you should do the content that you're inclined to do. And you should not do content that you are not inclined to. I've never believed in, well, the listeners want to hear this sort of content, so you should do it. No, absolutely not. Because if you told me, hey, my favorite thing to talk about is like lineup construction, like do we do left, right, left, or what kind of hitter do you want to put? If that's like one of your favorite things to talk about, you should absolutely talk about that. But if you said one of my least favorite things to talk about is, defensive metrics or something, because that would be one of mine, then you should really never talk about defensive metrics. If somebody asks about it, have a short answer. Don't dig into that. Don't talk about stuff you don't like, because you know what? The conversation about the lineup, because you like talking about that, is going to be 50 times better, even if you beat it to death, than if you talk about something you don't want to talk about. It's the same thing with me in news. I don't watch the news. I haven't watched the news in 15 years. it's all bad. So I don't want to talk about it. It's the same kind of idea. Defensive metrics bore the daylights out of me. I don't get a ton of value out of them. I don't want to talk about it. Bare minimum, I want to talk about lineups or rotations and what order I put it in. So I chase that stuff because I think the show is going to be better as a result of it. So no, I would never rag on someone for talking about that stuff because, I mean, if you're a what if person and that gets you going, it's going to be pretty good, right? Because you're going to be excited. You know, TJ's probably not going to be very excited if Lyle's excited. And I feel like if TJ's excited, Lyle's not excited. So I feel like is that kind of the trade-off here? Do you guys get excited about the same stuff all the time?
I'd say
I'm on to something.
I think we have pretty similar excitements. I'll say that's among the most fun I've had on an episode is speculating just this asinine idea of something that will never happen. And then 24 hours later, he signs for, 10 times that amount.
Right. With the team that everybody figured he was going to sign with. Yeah.
We've known for like 2 years.
It was a great 24 hours, Jason.
If that's what you enjoy, then that's what you should do. Absolutely. That's not necessarily something I'm going to listen to, but that's what you should do. Absolutely. People say, hey, should I start a podcast? You're asking the question. So I think the answer is yes. Should we talk about this? And it kind of sounds like you want to. So I think you absolutely should. That's the big difference between news and doing what you and I do, what you guys do, what I do. We get to talk about what we want. You don't have to talk about anything you don't want to. So if that's something you like, cool. But for me, it's just, I can't do this whole, this what if game. And I knew Ohtani was not happening. I think we all knew Ohtani was not happening. And it just seemed like a waste of time to me. Like, would you bet Ohtani in the leadoff spot? I don't know. I think I'd bat Mookie Betts in the leadoff spot. No. If he was on the Mariners, I think I'd bat Mookie Betts in the leadoff spot for the Dodgers instead of Ohtani. I think I'd bat Ohtani second. Like, I'm not answering that question, man. Come on. Like, I don't know. I'm not playing fantasy baseball here, but that's like, again, if it's something you enjoy, you should absolutely do it because it's going to be a good segment, relative to talking about something you think you should talk about or you have to talk about. It's something I hated when I was in radio. Like, dang it, Steve Sandmeyer. I don't want to talk about this. I don't want to talk about the All-Star game. Steve, I'll tell you guys a little story. I didn't know anything about radio. Okay. And I was only there 2 years. Still really don't know anything about radio, but I was stubborn. That's pretty laughable. I hate the All-Star game. Hate it. I don't care about it. I don't want to hear who made it. I don't care. I don't want to watch it. I will not watch it. And I would say that on the air. But Steve was like, people care about this. We should at least, talk about it. People want to hear, a conversation about it. And so we come to break and he was like, I get it, dude. I get it. But you can't say you don't care about it. Just don't say you don't care about it. I was like, all right, I won't say that. But I'm not going to care about it. He's like, I get it. I get that you don't like it and you don't care about it, but you can't say it. That's different. It's commercial radio. You're doing 3 hours a day, 5 days a week. You have a podcast you do for a couple hours a week. You got to pick the stuff you really want to talk about. And that's why the podcast format's been so interesting to me for the last, 6 or 7 years. So yeah, I certainly won't rag on you guys for picking out a year and $65 million. How do we make that work? It would have actually been a fun conversation. Oh, you mean the Mariners don't have any budget? How do we create, did you guys do this? How do we create $65 million in budget space to fit Shohei Ohtani in? Who do we have to trade for peanuts? Ty France, anybody, Luis Castillo, anybody making money, right? Except Julio.
It would have been Castillo, I think.
Yeah.
I don't know if we
create that space.
We never specifically strategized how to clear out all that space, but it's like, if they were actually going to stay under the budget, it's like, Castillo would put them like 55, 60-ish, close. Would have been close.
Yeah.
And
I wonder, like, this is something I do wonder because it was and still is my opinion that whatever dollar amount it would have cost to get Ohtani would have been worth it. Like, you're going to make it back.
Yeah. Agreed.
So, like, if your budget without Ohtani is 150, your budget with Ohtani should be 200 because your revenues are just going to skyrocket as a result of it, or whatever the number is. Do the math. I mean, you have smart people, do the math, right? But yeah, I chase, and I think as I get older and want to spend less time on the minutia of it, I narrow the focus. It's like, all right, let's wait till something happens. Because, a guy gets hurt and they're like, oh, what are they going to do now? And I'm like, can we just wait to see how long he's going to be out before we go? What are they going to do? What are they going to do? Brash is out. Santos is out. Wu is out. What are they going to do? What are they going to do? We don't even know how long they're going to be out. And people want answers. Damn it. They want answers. Like, I don't know. Let's wait for some tests to come back. I don't know. Can we be patient? I mean, the answer is no, but I'm doing my best,
Isn't that what's so awesome about this space? As you mentioned, like,
no.
I want to talk about no. Like, the point of, like, if you're going to do something, you want to do it your exact way. Like you said, I want to talk about lineups. I want to talk about rotations. I want to talk about the minor league system. I want to do these things that I care about. And that's all I'm going to talk about. I don't care if you guys want me to talk about something else. I'm not going to talk about it because I don't care about those things. I care about these things. And that we get to a point where you can create now your own platform to do exactly that. And that's all you have to do. It's great. And it's like what Lyle and I have done. We've found our niche of doing like fun topics, but also like we seriously break down things, and we have great interviews as well. And we be ourselves a little bit while also mixing in some fun social media content. And that's completely different from what you do. Completely different.
Sure.
And yet people now have the choice of both. And it doesn't just have to be like, oh, radio's been this way for 20 years. This is how you host a radio show. It's like, no, not anymore.
It is a lot different. And it's funny. You look around at some of the local guys have podcasts aside from their daily show. That's about completely different stuff that they haven't really talked about, where they can dig in a little deeper. And if you don't want to listen to, you don't have to. But that is the thing. There's like you guys do one thing and I kind of do another, even though the topic is the same. It's baseball. It's Mariners baseball mostly, if not entirely, right? But the things you guys talk about are, at least to a great extent, different. Like I'm going to dive into different things. And so as a consumer, like, I don't know, when football season comes, guys, it's like I would drag my TV. So I did this really goofy kind of college bachelor sort of thing in the master bedroom here at home. I put my television on one of those wheeled carts that like a teacher would have.
Oh.
And people are like, what are you doing? Like, what are you, 12? I was like, kind of, and I did that. So on like college football Saturday or whatever, I'd pull that TV out and plug it in, put it right next. So I got two huge screen TVs like right next to each other. And as a consumer, I get to watch whatever I want on these 4 screens if I open my laptop, or 5 if I want to use my phone. And that's kind of how like we consume content these days. You can have it all. You can literally have it all, because I know Steve Sandmeyer taught me this. You don't need people to be loyal to you. I don't need people to be loyal to me. We just need our audience, and whether we're trying to grow an audience or we're happy with the audience we have, or both, because it should be both. We just need to be in their rotation, because it's like, you don't have a favorite artist. You have favorite artists probably, right? You don't listen to just one. You might prefer one over the other, but it's not just one. You're not just like I don't know who your favorite artist would be. You don't have one show that you watch or one movie. You have many, right? And it just goes around, and you just kind of do this. It's the same thing with podcasts and with writers, and you can like them all to some extent and just pick and choose when you listen, when you read. You're right, TJ. That is the best thing. I thought you were going down the road of, isn't it great where people can jump on Twitter? And I was like, no, absolutely not.
Yeah, well,
but you make a good point.
I still do it anyways, unfortunately.
You do that too. Yeah, I think we all do to some extent.
I do want to ask about your show with Sandmeyer a little bit. The last time we had you on, I don't think we ever talked about it, but just like following you over the years, talking to you about it, like off recording. I know it's something you were always super passionate about in the time you did it. Like, was that the most fun you've had working in sports?
Yeah. And to be honest with you, I would say the only thing that comes close, even though it wasn't a full-time job, was the stuff I got to do with Aaron Goldsmith for Fox. Like, there was so much fun in that. And it's because of Steve, and it's because of Aaron. And it sounds kind of corny, but it really is about the people you're working with and that you're around. I mean, you guys just had Aaron on. Aaron is an absolute character, and there's a joke, and he's probably going to find it. And the more you're around him, the more you hear that sort of thing. And Sandmeyer literally will just create. Sandmeyer was like the Chris Farley of sports radio. And oddly enough, he did a really great Chris Farley impersonation right there in the studio. He'd kick his seat back and just go into his down by the river, Matt Foley kind of thing. And he just made it so fun. I did learn a lot from him. I would say, that was easy. I mean, it was a 3 to 7 show. The first 3 hours were live. The last hour was basically like the 3 best segments we just had. I'd stay up until 4 a.m, sleep till noon, get to the studio at 2:20, 2:30, sometimes 2:45, talk to Steve in his office for like 10 minutes, and then we go in the studio and do a 3-hour show and talk about like Seahawks and Mariners and stuff. And it's like, it doesn't get any better than that. You know, it absolutely doesn't get any better than that. Steve is fantastic. And I think when CBS kind of sold us out and then they sold all their stations, the most disappointing thing was that Steve didn't continue to pursue sports radio. So good at it. To watch him operate was like, it was magic. It was like, I don't know how he's doing this. Like, he will literally, like, we'll have a guest on and it could be like the beat reporter for the Dallas Cowboys or something, right? Like, Seattle's playing the Cowboys this weekend. And I would get nervous because I'm like the new guy and I'm sitting across from him. And we asked this guy a question and the guy's answering the question. And Steve hits the mute button on his mic and is talking to the producer. And I'm like, Steve, what if he's done talking and you're talking over there? Like, I'm not prepared to like take over and handle this right now. Like, and he would always the timing would always be perfect. Like, he would always be able to be done, get the information he needed, and still somehow take in the answer that our guest was giving him. I don't know how he did it. The guy was fantastic and we had a lot of fun. I never laughed so hard in my life. It was really great. Yeah, it was really great. I always said, I'll never go back into radio unless Steve does and wants me to come with him. Then I wouldn't even think twice.
All right. So it sounds like 99% the door's closed, but maybe not totally. There is a scenario where you can get back into it. A small scenario, very small.
I would say there was a greater chance of Shohei Ohtani signing with the Mariners than that happening, though.
So maybe not.
So it's non-zero, but it's really, it's pretty much zero. Yeah.
Okay.
So.
Well, okay. Getting all the way back to kind of where this conversation started in terms of TJ was like, oh, in December, did you care to peek your head into the Twitter world at all or not? Even if the answer was no, where was your head at? I would say when the Jared Kelenic trade went down, because for a lot of people, like I know on this podcast, that was the time of the offseason before all the moves started to happen where we sat here and said, like, what is this team going to do moving forward? Because it felt like they were essentially punting on an offseason. Like, did you have this feeling of, like, did you have a similar feeling or did you say, no, they're going to figure it out?
I didn't really know what they were going to do, to be honest with you. I thought they were going to have to be creative, kind of go back to the way that Jerry put together the 16, 17, and 18 team. You're not adding, payroll really. You have to be creative with it. Maybe swap out this payroll for that payroll. And they did that several times this winter. When they moved, like I knew Kelenic was getting moved. I think a lot of people felt that was coming, right? But then when it was, hey, this is what they're getting back. And oh, by the way, Marco's deal's going with them. Evan White's deal's going on. It's like, okay, I see what they're doing here. So that told me that they had a backup plan and that was just step one. But it was really, really disappointing because you should be able to get more for Jared Kelenic. And when you have to attach money to it, when you do that just so you can attach money to it, it's really disappointing. So that to me was the first sign of the level to what degree payroll was essentially being frozen. I mean, that's what's happened. We haven't cut payroll. We haven't seen the Mariners cut payroll because they're actually a little over where they were a year ago after the Stanek signing. But it was disappointing because if you even go to 155, 160, it's a completely different offseason. You might be able to keep Eugenio Suarez at third base and hope he bounces back a little bit, but at least you're going to get pretty good defense and a guy the clubhouse likes and a guy that hit the ball out of the ballpark and still add a Mitch Garver, maybe even still add a Jorge Polanco. You know what I mean? So it was disappointing. I figured they're going to be limited and they're going to have to take more chances and the risk is going to be higher on this team. And at the end of the day, I think we all agree that's what we're looking at. We're probably looking at a team with more upside than last year, but with more risk as well from an injury point of view and from a performance point of view. I don't think we really know what we're going to see from Dom Canzone or Luke Raley for sure, or Luis Urias, those three in particular. So there's some risk there too. Really disappointing, but yeah, the Kelenic trade was the big sign, the big kind of and I think I reacted to it like an 8th grader being asked to empty the dishwasher, take out the garbage. My eyes rolled and I was like, you got to be kidding me. Like now we're doing this. Like, yeah, that was really disappointing.
But it feels like now that the offseason is concluded, and the first time that since Jerry has overseen the Mariners organization, this is like the first time it feels like they've not like left camp a player short. Like you don't look at the roster and you say, well, Like, there's still a pretty clear hole. I mean, some people are going to say third base, and they certainly have plenty of reason to think that. But, I mean, in terms of all the boxes they needed to check in the offseason, DH hole, solved for the most part. Second base, given health, solved. Corner outfield spots, upgraded in both of them. Like, it's got to check. Like, you start going down the list, and you're like, well, I'm like, this is like actually like the circle's complete, it feels like.
Yeah, and earlier in the offseason, I kind of called it like a little magic act, because considering the hand that they were dealt and the lack of resources, they did a really good job putting together a team that people can believe in, like it should have looked different. It should have looked different. There should have been a little bit more money spent. Maybe take a chance on a Bellinger, maybe take a chance on, Jung-Hoo Lee or somebody like that, somebody that with a higher probability, attached to him, even though it was going to cost you more money. I think that would have been ideal. And then maybe a Luke Raley's not here. And in that case, although I love that trade, or you don't make the Mitch Haniger deal, with Robbie Ray, maybe you don't make that deal if you have more money. Robbie Ray is still around for maybe August or September and maybe even next year. And yet you still basically have the same offense you do. And it's like, it's disappointing because with the Brian Wu thing that hit on Monday, and we don't know how long he's going to be out, but the question always comes up is like, what do they do if he is? And then the other side of it, you get some people saying, see, they should have signed Blake Snell. Well, here's the thing. When the offseason started, I was like, they need to get a mid-rotation to back-end rotation veteran. One of my ideas was like Sean Manaea, and I can't remember what he cost, but let's just say it was $10 million or $8 million, something like that. If you spend $8 to $10 million on Sean Manaea because you feel like Brian Wu should start the year in the minors, or you feel like he should start the year in the pen, or you're a little worried about his arm, or whatever the situation is, if you do that, that's $8 to $10 million less in payroll space you have. And guess what you don't get to do at that point? You can have either Jorge Polanco or Mitch Garver with Sean Manaea, but not both. Who would you rather have, even right now with the Brian Wu news, not knowing whether he's going to miss a week or longer? Sean Manaea, just for example, because he cost about that much, or Jorge Polanco, or Sean Manaea, or Mitch Garver. I think you're taking the hitters, right, guys? You're taking the hitter. You're taking Manaea, or you're taking Garver over Manaea, right? And you're taking Polanco over Manaea. So that's the kind of scenario that front office was in, right? Like, it was kind of a no-brainer. The only thing I wish they would have done, and I think it was also difficult, was find that guy that's on the fringe, the Austin Voth type. Find another guy like that you thought could give you 8 starts during the year, 10 starts during the year. That might cost you $2 to $3 million. I was hoping they would find a guy like that. But when you look on the market, like Keenan Middleton got like $6 or $7 million for 1 year as a reliever. You weren't getting a $2 to $3 million guy who you could lean on for 8 to 10 starts. It just wasn't there. It just never, they'd had to trade for it. So I think they have done a really good job. And I think because of that, I think most Mariner fans are still excited for the season to start, and they still believe in this team, despite the fact that ownership didn't hold up their end of the bargain. I don't think there's any other way around it. They haven't. And the front office is saving their ass, so to speak. And I know this is coming up in some circles, but with Service and the contracts for Service and DePoto, I got to think that's not entirely one-sided. I got to think that Service and DePoto aren't 100% sure this is the place for them. I don't think DePoto's walking away, but there might be a little hesitation. Do I deserve this? I think I deserve better than this. I've done a good job. I deserve the support. What in the world is going on? 'Cause 3 times, guys, he's had his offseason plans pulled out from under him. 3 times in 4 years, I think it is. If I'm the GM, man, if Jerry DePoto hadn't walked away from the Angels, he might have already walked away from the Mariners, but he's not going to get to do that twice and get another president job or a GM job. So I think he's going to sit around and see what he can do this year and kind of see what happens. But it's hard to look at the transactions as a whole and be disappointed, considering what we know about the resources they had to play with. And they didn't trade from the rotation, and they didn't trade Gabriel Gonzalez was the best prospect they traded. Man, I mean, again, magic act, right?
What's kind of remarkable is the moves in the offseason gave no indication that there was a lame duck manager and a lame duck executive. None at all. You would imagine if someone's worried about their job, Like you have no problem trading any of the top 6 prospects away for a major piece.
You could also make a case, though, that the reason for that is because they didn't have resources to go do that, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like if you're trading, Young and Harry Ford and Gonzalez and Wu in 2 different deals, you're probably bringing back a player that's making money. You didn't have that flexibility, right? Couldn't go get Juan Soto, even if it made sense, because the money wasn't going to work.
Yeah.
So maybe some of that had something to do, but you're right. They certainly didn't act like they were trying to save their jobs, because they probably would have been a little bit more aggressive, right? Probably would have seen more prospects traded. Like Harry Ford probably gone, maybe even Cole Young or Colt Emerson probably traded to get a veteran in or try to save their job. So maybe they don't feel like it's lame duck. Maybe it's just a timing thing, but I would not be surprised if we learned that there was a little bit of a hesitation on Service and DePoto's part about re-signing, or they didn't like the terms. Maybe the ownership, in any conversations they may have had, I don't know that they have or not, weren't really to their liking. Maybe they only wanted to do 1 year or 2 years, and those guys wanted 3 or 4. I think they've earned it. I mean, what's it been, 9 years? And look where they are without spending a bunch of money, kind of saving the ownership's ass every single year, making the team relevant, making that ownership, giving that ownership money to throw into their pockets and not back into the team, right? And that's because DePoto and Hollander and that group have done such a good job putting this together. I don't know. I sound like a little bit of a DePoto fan, so to speak. I do think he's done a good job. But I will say this just before we move on, because I've been accused of this before. I don't know Jerry DePoto. I don't know him. Never met him, never talked to him, never had him on a show, never had him on and I don't want to. We talked about this before. I don't want to. I don't know that he's a great executive, but I think he's good. And I think you get to great by winning divisions and at least threatening World Series, and maybe winning one. I think what's happened in St. Louis over the years has made some of their executives look great. Walt Jocketty and into John Mosaic and Brian Cashman had success, and now, he might be the guy in that division with the hottest seat. But when you win consistently, and Seattle really hasn't won yet, but they're kind of right there in the middle of it. It's too early to call him great, but it's impossible to not sit here and if you truly understand what he was dealt every year, and as the bigger picture when he came on in 2016, you can't spend any more money. Like, we can't add to what we're doing, and we might ask you to pare back a little bit, but we're going to allow you to rebuild when it comes time. You just let us know, keep us abreast, and we'll let you do that. But we're not going to spend more money. And then we're not going to let you just spend a bunch of money once it's time. We're going to gradually push that forward. And to do the job that they've done to open up this 54% window, from what Jerry DePoto would call it, right? But that's where they are. They're in a position to maybe be what the Cardinals were from 2006 to 2020 or so. Mm-hmm. That's what they're trying to do. And they're trying to do that because that's what's going to be dictated of them by that ownership. They're not going to spend $200 million on payroll. So, yeah, I do like what DePoto's done. And I think Justin Hollander's done a really good job supporting him as well. And they have other staffers that deserve credit. But Jerry DePoto is the best general manager this organization has ever had. Even though he hasn't won as much as Pat Gillick. Pat Gillick was like, let me sell out for these next 2 or 3 years. And at the time it made sense. They had an older club. Jerry DePoto has shown the creativity and the discipline that Pat Gillick just didn't have to do it. So I hope he stays. I hope he stays around at least another 3-4 years, because I think they can do some damage, and I think they have a chance to do some damage this year.
We'll get back to Jason Churchill here in a second. Before, let's hear a word from TicketSmarter. Opening day is here, and we have the place for you to go to grab your tickets for this upcoming Mariners season. TicketSmarter. TicketSmarter is a national ticketing marketplace with seats to more than 125,000 live events like concerts, sports, and theater shows. The next time you need tickets, think smarter. Think TicketSmarter. Go to TicketSmarter.com to reserve your seats now using code MARINE10 for $10 off your purchase. Again, that's MARINE10 for $10 off your purchase at TicketSmarter.com. Go get those tickets for opening day. All right, back to Jason Churchill.
Yeah, it's in other words, in terms of what them trying to be what the Cardinals were, you're in contention for the postseason every year, and you hope a couple of those years you make a deep run is what I think you're saying. And it's funny you mentioned what you said about DePoto. I looked this up the other day. This is the second time in the franchise's history where they've had a 3+ year stretch where they've won 88 or more games in 3 consecutive seasons. That's it. So like they're not doing that a whole lot with other GMs. As somebody who grew up with Bavesi and then Zarenzik, like Dapota's done a lot, especially like you said in this offseason when he basically had hands tied behind his back with the money he could spend.
Yeah, it's too bad we're not going to get to see that next step this year. I don't know if we're going to be able to see it at all. I'm the one thing I'm kind of afraid of at this point is that the ownership group's going to be like, whoa, we pulled the plug on adding to payroll this year significantly. And look what Jerry was still able to do. Maybe we could just do it this way all the time because we're still going to make money. It's like the whole Pittsburgh Pirates thing I keep bringing up. They don't spend money, and yet they make money every year. The Cincinnati Reds don't spend money, yet they make money every year. Why would you risk it? These guys are like finance guys. They built tech companies and they sold shares and they bought shares and that's what they do. They like hedge their bets, right? That's what this ownership would be doing, is hedging their bets. Like, well, we're not gonna risk that because we'd rather make 10 million in profit than put another 10 or 15 million investment in it just so we can make that same 10 million in profit. You know, I've been having this conversation quite a bit with folks too. The incentive to win the World Series from a financial standpoint is just not there. Like the Texas Rangers owners there's not some significant huge windfall that's just automatically going to make up for any money you put into winning the World Series. That's not the way it works at all. And I was thinking, because we had on the Future Stars series podcast a couple of weeks back, we had Jim Duquette on, and Duquette talked about incentivizing winning from like an individual team standpoint. And it got me thinking, and I came to the conclusion that maybe we need some sort of, we take maybe a little bit of the revenue sharing and we get a couple of sponsors that like sponsor the World Series, like it's the Nike World Series or whatever. And we blow up Nike all over the screens, give them all and maybe there's like this $200 million pot where the World Series winner takes home like a huge chunk of that. The owner gets to do whatever he wants with it. The players' bonuses are completely separate. The owner gets to pocket $100 million. Like maybe the second place team gets 50, and then maybe the LCS, the other two LCS split everything. They get 25 apiece, and it's a $200 million pot. At that point, you might get some of these teams like Tampa even throwing in an extra $15, $20 million a year, because the chances to win, $100 million I'm just throwing out a number. Maybe that's not the right number. It's pretty significant. I mean, that's a year of payroll for the Tampa Bay Rays, sometimes more. That's a year or more of payroll for the Pittsburgh Pirates. Might they take a look one day in December and go, if we just gave, I don't know, Matt Chapman, 3-60 and made him our third baseman, would that increase our chances to get to the playoffs by 5 to 10% and increase our chances to getting to the LCS and getting at least $25 million that would pay for his whole salary this year and then some? Like, you see what I'm saying? Like, the decisions become different when the payoff is real, and winning the World Series and like pocketing a huge sum of money that just goes right into the owner's pocket and he can do whatever the heck he wants with it. Like, that's a completely different set of motivations, right? Like, if I spend 200 and I can win 100 back, that's different than spending 160 and maybe not having nearly as good a chance to, I'll spend that extra 40 or I'll spend 20 or I'll spend 25. The incentive to win the World Series just is not there. The owners don't care about the same things that the players do, the managers do, the coaches do, the fans do. You want your Mariners to win because you want to be like they're your team, man. Like, you've been rooting for them since you can remember. It's a pride thing. It's civic value. It's you celebrate with other fans. It's something you love to do. And when they win, that's the most fun ever, right? When they went to the playoffs 2 years ago, that was like incredible. The Toronto series was like throw a damn parade. It wasn't the World Series, but it felt like, all right, we got to throw a parade because that was pretty damn cool, right? Mm-hmm. The fans get that. The owners don't feel that. They just don't feel that, especially in baseball. They just don't feel that at all. And I don't think a salary floor changes that. I don't think a salary cap changes that. I don't think changing the draft or the PPI or any of that. I think the only way to truly do that is to tell the owners and give the owners, well, there's this pot of gold right here. Do you want a legit chance of that or not? And I don't know what that number is. Maybe it's 300 million. Maybe it's 150 million. I have no idea. But there's got to be something. And if you take a little bit of that money out of the revenue sharing, because you're going to have fewer teams qualifying for the revenue sharing. If you tell the Pittsburgh Pirates and Cincinnati Reds, hey, all you got to do is get to the LCS and you win $25 million or you win $40 million. They're going to spend anyway, whether they get that revenue sharing or not, because, hey, that's $40 million. And then I'll just get the $80 million in revenue sharing at the end of the day. They're still in that small market because we don't base revenue sharing off of how much money they spend on payroll, right? You could spend $200 million on payroll, but if you're in that market, that's going to be a receiver. You're still going to get that. So now instead of getting $100 million, I get 150 just by spending $30 more million in payroll. I give myself a better chance at 50. That's a bet I think owners would make more often, certainly more often than they are now. We're probably 50 years away from anything like that happening. Get a gambling company behind it, right? I know it's a bad sore subject right now, but like DraftKings and FanDuel and casinos and like, you don't think they'd throw in $100 million for it to be the DraftKings World Series? I think they would. Yeah. I absolutely think they would.
Mm-hmm. We could have Ohtani sponsor it now.
We could. Yeah. We absolutely could. And he could probably tell everybody. No, I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't want to speculate. I've been staying away from that because I just don't know. I don't want to say, oh, come on, he did it. I don't know. I really don't know. So.
I'll say we trashed on the internet here in the first 30 minutes of this, but the internet showed its good side when that stuff was all coming out. I'll say I thought so.
The jokes.
I was thoroughly entertained.
Oh, the jokes. Okay. Yeah. I thought you meant like we got people were being patient and people would be like, let's wait for this to come out because I didn't see any of that. No. I just saw he's guilty, and I saw all kinds of Pete Rose stuff come up because the situations are identical and we already know the facts. We already know Ohtani did it. He already admitted it. Didn't you guys hear? Like that was the tone I was getting from everybody.
Right.
Like, we know so little about this. It is fishy. It's certainly fishy. Got to be looked at. But until we have facts, like I don't know.
I think the jokes were funny. Like the people being unserious, but just having some fun with it. That was like the part. Yeah. But no, TJ, say what you just said again.
We got P Rose on video today. Like,
yeah,
it was
great. Crazy. Like, what do you say? Like he needed an interpreter. And if he had an interpreter, he'd been off scot-free.
Yeah, I would have been in the Hall of Fame.
Yeah.
But I think he kind of further incriminated himself because he said in the 70s and 80s when nobody had ever actually accused him of betting on baseball when he was playing in the 70s, it was all as a manager. Maybe late in his playing career, but he was never like quote unquote convicted of that. Nobody ever actually put that on paper that that's what they believed happened. And he just told us that he was betting on baseball while he was playing. He just told us that today.
Yeah.
Well, he's already got the lifetime ban, so might as well just air it all out.
I guess if he feels there's no chance. Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, the Pete Rose thing sucks. I don't know. I hope Ohtani didn't have anything, to do with the direct betting. If he was just trying to help a friend, there's a way to explain some of that. Some people are talking about the illegality of it too. And it's like, yeah, you can't bet while you're in California, but like people leave California and bet all the time. And hey, guess what? Ohtani has a job that takes him away from California. So if you're looking at it from away from the MLB thing, if you're looking for the legal versus illegal part of it, there's ways to explain that away too. So I'm just like, let's just wait for this to come out. And if he was involved, take care of it. If he wasn't, let's just not convict the guy before, we go through any sort of investigation, because there's no other sign of anything in his whole life or career that we know of that would point in this direction. So this is almost like they should have signed Blake Snell. Brian Wu's hurt. That like we jump to conclusions. We overreact. We want the extreme. We want to jump after it. We want to chase the emotion because we want to be heard, and that's the easiest way to make noise, right?
Well, thankfully for around baseball, it's been a pretty bad run for superstars PR-wise. I'd say in the last 3 years. But for Julio, it's been exactly the opposite. I mean, we barely heard from him all offseason. He went down to Tampa. He locked himself in a batting cage in a gym and just was working out all off season. And, Jason, we could really tell when we were down there at spring training talking to Julio, or trying to talk to Julio. But as he told everyone, like he started saying no so much this off season so he could just focus on being a better baseball player rather than talking to idiots like us. So it's remarkable. And I don't want to set the expectation too high for Julio this season, but it's really even though he's only 23, the fact that he seems to have already figured out, I just got to cut all this stuff out. This is not benefiting me. I need to only do things that benefit myself and make me better for this 2023 season. So off of all of that, what are we expecting for him this year? What are you expecting as a step for Julio this year?
Yeah, that's a good question. If I told you guys, he's 23 years old, right? Yeah. If I told you guys, especially after what you just said, he's pretty clearly dedicated to being as good as he can be. He cares about that. He pretty clearly cares about that. He's not just here to make a bunch of money. It's pretty clear he wants to be, at least for now, he wants to be good. Maybe that changes when he gets older, but right now he's 23. He wants to be great. And he's attached himself to Seattle. Like it's a very positive thing for him, which is great for Seattle because that's not super common, at least in Major League Baseball, right? If I told you, like, he's been a 5 to 6 win player 2 years in a row. The first year he did that, he missed 25, 30 games. Mm-hmm. If I told you that he combined last year's health with his performance in his first season plus 15%, 10%, and ended up hitting 290, 360 to 370 OBP, hit 35 homers, stole 40 to 50 bags, played 150, 155 games, played the defense in center field. That's a 7.5, 8 win player. I don't think that would surprise anybody because it's not all that different than what he's done. It's just healthy, in the lineup pretty much every day, and take just a little step forward. He takes that kind of a natural step forward that we really haven't seen from him yet. Because in some ways he took a step backward last year, except he was healthy all year, right? Hmm. I would be surprised at all. I think the ceiling for him in 24 is probably 7.5, 8 wins, which is, and that's MVP territory. Like in the American League, a lot of things can happen, but Ohtani's not here anymore. And, Mike Trout, you never know what's going to happen there. Aaron Judge, you never know what's going to happen there. Who's a better bet in the American League? Like clearly a better bet to win the MVP. I don't know if there is someone.
Like you can
who is it? Maybe Juan Soto. And how long is Seager going to be out?
Right.
So if Seager was perfectly healthy and didn't have a track record, I'd be like, well, there's your number one guy. Like I would bet on Aaron Judge missing some time. I would bet on Mike Trout missing some time. Soto doesn't play any defense, but he's in the mix certainly because he can end up hitting 300 with a 450 OBP and 40 bombs in New York. And if they win that division, he might be the favorite. Corey Seager might be number one if he was going to start the season healthy and didn't have the track record he did. But yeah, is there a better bet in the American League to be a 7.5, 8 win MVP than Julio Rodriguez? I don't think so.
No. I mean, and you know what I think a huge key for the guy is, and we've talked about this a little bit, like just get hot out of the gate. Cause like the one thing that's kind of held him back is both his Aprils have been less than ideal. In the first month, his first month of his career, we know like umps were squeezing him and he and like the zones were expanding, all that stuff. But like objectively, like his Aprils have not been great. So if he could just get off to a good start and then just maintain, I think that could do wonders for him instead of having to play catch up like he did the last 2 years.
I'm hoping for one thing from this marriage because Julio will take care of itself. Even if he struggles early, he'll figure it out. He showed that even in his rookie year, like you were just saying. Well, the one thing I really want to see, and I think would be healthy for this team, and I think it would be healthy for the fan base, Luis Urias and Josh Rojas just holding down the fort. Just be fringe average the first like month and a half. Don't crawl into a hole and dig and throw dirt over your and bring attention to the Suarez deal and what the team didn't do and what now they need to go do because there's this huge hole. Just go up there and go, 90, 95 WRC plus, right? Like the first 6 weeks, and just keep the haters at bay. Whatever. It's like, well, okay, they haven't been good. They haven't been Suarez in year one in Seattle, but neither was Suarez last year. Just be kind of fringe average and then have a few moments, get a big hit a couple times in the first month and a half. Keep that portion of the pressure off of them. I think that would be really healthy for this team because I think you get into to June and July and you get away from the cold weather and where it's the ball travels a little better at home and it doesn't get in your head as much. And, it just keep that away, and especially at third base. I mean, that's really it. Especially, and it goes for everybody, but it just seems like third base where you just don't really know what we're going to get from those guys in combination. They have an opportunity, righty lefty. It's probably mostly going to be Urias, and we've seen Urias do some things. Certainly wasn't last year, but the 2 years prior, it wasn't really 600 plate appearances worth, but he was a pretty decent player, and if he could be on a pace to be like a win and a half player. Be a fringe average to average defender and be a round average offense. That's a huge win for Seattle to kind of buy them a little time to fix that position long term. And next year it might just be Polanco, right? It might just be Cole Young at second and Polanco. It might just be 1 year, which is why that trade was a little weird to me, to be honest with you. You're going to pay Luis Urias $5 million in the first year and maybe not tender him the second year at $6.5 million or something. And you gave up Isaiah Campbell for that. Like that was probably the strangest deal I think they made all winter. So maybe they just think Urias is a bench guy because now Polanco's left-handed hitting, switch hitter, but also left-handed at third base, and they have a right-handed guy that could fit in at second, at short, and at third for a switch hitter and 2 lefties. Maybe they're thinking Urias is that. But yeah, I just, that's what I want to see. That's the thing that I'm thinking about the most. I want Urias to get some hits early, to not turn into Colton Wong, because those are some of the worst nights talking about the baseball team. And Colton Wong would go over 3 and get pinch hit 4 in the 7th inning, like every night that he started. And then he just faded really, really. The Tommy La Stella conversation only lasted 15 minutes, or that would have been another one, right? I just think it would be important for that, because I think as soon as we see the kind of the same thing happening, even though it's at another position with another player, it's like, here we go again. The Mariners kind of went cheap. They didn't do something, and they're sitting around hoping for a young player to do something, or hoping for an unproven player to do something. And I think fans are so tired of that part of it, even when it doesn't have anything to do with payroll, that it will just it's just going to turn quick. And I just hate when the temperature turns like that quickly. It's like, here we go again. This team's going to be mediocre. And it's just, man, that makes social media guys unbearable. Absolutely unbearable. It's like they get swept in a series. It's freaking May 3rd, and the season is already over to them. And then when they go on like a big long winning streak, and then the next year comes, and the same people are like, well, you can't rely on like a 14-game winning streak every year. And then the next year they don't rely on a 14-game winning streak, and they end up basically in the same place. That just gets buried. But if the second baseman and the third baseman in back-to-back years toss up like a 50 WRC plus, we're never going to hear the end of it. We're never going to hear the end of it. That's going to be the thing all season. You missed the playoffs by 2 games because Colton Wong was your second baseman for 2 or 3 months, because Luis Urias was your third baseman for 2 or 3 months. For my sanity, guys, I need Luis Urias. I don't care what the batting average is. I don't care what the home runs are. Get a couple of big hits, hold down the fort, just to keep Churchill from going absolutely bananas and disappearing into the night.
So you mentioned he might go to the bench, Jason. Who could he possibly replace on the bench? Is it someone we might have talked about last week in
No, I don't think
certain
so.
group chat?
Yeah,
maybe
the guy with
a tough discussion to have here with Lyle.
Maybe the guy with not really a great swing, but a player I like. It's Dylan Moore. I hate his swing. Hate it so much. It's painful. It hurts. It hurts so much. It hurts. It physically hurts me to watch him swing a bat. But I will say this. I went back and watched about, I think it was like 11 or 12 of his plate appearances, and probably got about 8 swings 2 nights ago before I wrote my final Cactus League thoughts at Mariners After Midnight. His load is a little shorter, and it's creating a little more consistent path through the zone with the barrel. So he might have gone from like the 728th best swing in the league to like maybe the 715th best swing in the league. And I think that's something, Lyle. I think that's something. I do. I think it's a note you should write down, maybe put it on a t-shirt, that maybe he doesn't have the worst swing in the league anymore. And I think that's progress. And I think that's probably about all the progress we're going to see with Dylan Moore in that swing. But I'm optimistic.
You know what I'd put on a t-shirt? So now, because he's come into spring training healthy this year. He didn't come into spring training healthy in 23 when his season was delayed.
He was still valuable though, too. Like, I'm not ragging on the performance at all. Like, he was still valuable even though the batting average didn't look good. It took him a little while to get going though, right?
It did. And the strikeouts were high and can be high a lot of the time. However, I will say in 2022, Dylan Moore put up a 126 WRC plus. You know who didn't do that in 2022? Ronald Acuna. I'm going to put that on a t-shirt. No context, nothing further, nothing else, just that.
Dylan Moore, put Dylan Moore after the carrot, right? Acuna, carrot, Dylan Moore.
There we go.
And then put his little face, his cartoon face, like right there. Come on, man. You got to do it. If that's your dude, is that your favorite player, or are you just fond of the player?
He's like that Mariner that, like, I mean, you kind of grasp onto, where you just, you grasp onto. Who I grasp onto. Yeah. Okay. 2020 started to sell it for me. I was like, this guy could do a lot of things when he started to have that great stretch in 2020. And it's kind of the idea of like, here's what it really is. Obviously he's not Julio, he's not Cal, he's not JP, he's not somebody like that. He's not like one of the like premier favorite Mariners. Like, it's not who most people are going to latch onto. But I look at a guy and say, when you want a utility player, when he's at his best, like, I don't think there's that many other guys around the league who do that type of role better than him, where it's like has some pop, hits lefties, walks, steals bases, and plays every position. It's like, I feel like that kind of gets underappreciated. So I like to appreciate it when nobody else does, when he's at his best.
He's been worth over 6 wins above replacement using the Fangraphs formula.
Pretty good.
In 2 full seasons worth of at-bats, plate appearances.
Yeah.
Now, granted, some of that is defense, but if you told me he was going to be a 3-win player, it's still an ugly swing. It's still at best the 715th best swing in baseball.
Okay.
But he's still getting it done. Yeah, I'm with you. The 126 you're talking about was at 2022.
Yeah.
In the shortened season, it was just like 160 plate appearances, but he put up a $140.
Right.
Right. And then the next year he struggled and got overexposed playing like 125 games or whatever. But
right.
He's been consistently like around a 1.5, 2-win player, even in 2022. Yeah, he's a bench guy. That's all you're asking him to do. I'm a fan of the player, just not the swing. Just like it hurts, man. I got to close my eyes sometimes. Sometimes I'm just like, I got to be prepared to see the swing, especially if it's in a clutch situation where it's like they're down a run or it's tied. There's a runner at third. I need Dylan Moore to hit the ball in the air the other way and not try to pull it, because when he pulls it, he pops it up to the second baseman like every single time. 105% of the time, at least, that's what happens. And I'm sitting there. I'll watch it then, but otherwise I will look away. Okay. I will truly look away from that swing because I don't want to be bothered by it. Now, J.P. Crawford's swing still bothers me, but he's made some adjustments. And when you can make it work, like what's the rule that Ben Lindbergh and his co-author made up? The only rule is it has to work, right? So it can be ugly. It can seem weird and off kilter and be new, and people might not be able to look at it and understand it. But if it works, right? And
like Craig Counsell.
And Dylan Moore, Craig Counsell. I've heard some very R to X rated ways that some fellow players, some of his teammates even have described Craig Counsell's, putting his hand way up and he's kind of like doing this. Anyway, Dylan Moore, I'm a fan of the player, just not the swing. Urias, maybe that's a situation where Urias either does some of the same things Dylan Moore does. They can coexist because Josh Rojas isn't going to be back next year. So maybe it's Urias and Dylan Moore on the bench with some sort of combination between Luke Raley and Cade Marlowe and Dom Canzone, and they have an everyday right fielder. Maybe that's Mitch Haniger, maybe it's not. It would be weird, though, if they did make that trade for 1 year of Luis Urias at $5 million. It just seems like the plan was not only to trade for 2 years of Jorge Polanco, but for 2 years of Luis Urias at the same time, right? So we'll see. Third base, I know Suarez wasn't good last year, but he did hit 22 homers, and fans think about that sort of thing, right? I don't want to read about on Twitter in May or hear people on radio saying, man, they're third baseman, they're hitting like a $187 with like 2 extra base hits and a third. If one thing happens in the right direction, I want it to be third base. I know that's a weird thing because the upside there is not very big, but just don't cover yourself up with dirt in April. That's all I'm asking. Don't kill yourself in April. Save me some sanity.
Jason, if you were to pick a Mariners hitter who's going to be the most valuable hitter not named Julio Rodriguez this year, who is it?
The best or the most valuable?
I'll say most valuable.
I'll say the most valuable is Mitch Garver.
Mm-hmm.
The reason I say that is because you think about the rest of the lineup. You get because you said other than Julio. So you got Julio, but you got J.P. Crawford, you got Luke Raley, you got Cal Raleigh, who's really a left-handed hitter. You have Dom Canzone, who's a lefty. You don't know really what you're going to get from Mitch Haniger in terms of how many games, and Luis Urias is your other righty. So having a steady right-handed bat somewhere in the middle of the order to balance it out is really important. I've made this point several times. What we don't really think about a whole lot is left-handers have way more success against left-handers than right-handers have against right-handers. So you don't want to stack lefties. You try to avoid that. It's not really so much about going back and forth in your lineup. You're trying to stay away from stacking lefties, particularly because lefties just struggle more against lefties than righties struggle against righties. And last year, like you look at Suarez gone, Teoscar gone, and while they weren't great, and you don't really know what you're going to get from Ty France either. That's the other thing. If he performs really well, then maybe Garver's not maybe France is the most valuable. But I think it's one of those two guys, and I would lean on Garver because he's probably going to hit third and fourth, depending on who's on the mound, to balance out that lineup from a hand-in-the standpoint. Mitch Garver can make managers stick with a right-handed pitcher. I don't think Ty France, at least the first half of the season, is going to do that. So I think right now it's Mitch Garver. And if they want to leave the lefty in after Julio Rodriguez to turn Polanco around, they might be making a mistake. And to face Garver, they might be making a mistake. So when you can force the hand of the other team with the guy in your lineup, you can do a lot of things to that other club. And you think about all the lefties in the American League and in the American League West last year, especially. You saw all those lefties in the bullpen in Texas and LA and Oakland had a guy or two that were decent, and certainly Houston had a guy in their rotation in Framber Valdez that presented problems to lefties. But having legitimate, consistent right-handed hitting was a problem last year. I mean, Suarez, France, and Teoscar Hernandez were not consistent performers. So if Garver can be anything close to what he was a year ago for 110, 115 games, man, that's going to go a long way in replacing, Suarez and Teoscar Hernandez, really. I mean, another thing, a friend of mine made a point today. Ty France is going to bat like 7th and 8th. He was batting 3rd sometimes last year. Even while he wasn't hitting the ball that well, he was still batting because it was kind of mandated. Kind of needed him to do that because it's either going to be Teoscar or it's going to be Cal Raleigh or it's going to be Ty France. So sometimes it was one, sometimes it was the other. Now France is batting like 7th or 8th. Now you tell me which one you think he's going to have the best chance to have success at least early in the year while he's working on things and trying to get his confidence back. Batting in the lower quarter of the order, right? And Mitch Garver's big. I think Polanco is going to have a big year. And that's not because he had a big spring, because I think a lot of guys had a big spring. Polanco fits in this lineup really, really well. You could lead off Julio and bat Polanco 2nd. You can lead off Crawford and bat Polanco 3rd. You can bat Polanco 4th. The versatility there and the fact that he's pretty good from both sides of the plate, really, really valuable. So I just think Garver tips the scales in the direction and the way that Service wants to build his lineups consistently. And especially because when you think about Canzone and Raley and Cal Raleigh and JP Crawford, they're going to be in the lineup at the same time quite a bit. So having that production from both sides of the plate and having balance, I mean, Mitch Garver is such a huge part of that. If you told me Mitch Haniger is going to be healthy for 125 games, I'd give you someone else other than Garver. Probably would just pick Polanco, but because I don't know we're going to get that, I don't know what we're going to get for France. It's got to be Mitch Garver. It was my favorite move of the year of the offseason because they had to get something significant with money where it didn't cost him something via trade, where it didn't cost him draft pick. It didn't cost him, Colt Emerson or something. I just thought that was huge. And I know it was just 2 years and 24, and I know Mitch Garver's not a superstar, but get a guy in there that's 270 with 18 homers and an above average on base percentage and some consistency. I mean, that's just huge. They just haven't had a whole lot of that. Guy puts the ball in play more than the Suarez and the Teoscar types. It's pretty huge for this team.
What are your expectations for Dom Canzone? Well, we're going down the lineup here a little bit. He's kind of everybody's popular pick to just break out and figure it all out this year. Like, are you on that train? I know usually you're a little bit more like tempered with your expectations than some. Like I've kind of started to, I have started to buy into that whole Canzone thing, but where are you at?
So for me, it really depends on how much they allow him to face lefties. Because here's the thing. You could tell me, hey, he's going to hit righties to like a 130 WRC plus. And I'll be like, I buy that. I absolutely buy that. Would I bet on it? I don't know, but I'll buy it. If you told me at the end of the year he had, 450 plate appearances and 400 of them were against righties and he had a 130, I'd totally buy it. But how much does he hit lefties? Because I actually want him to hit lefties. So in some ways, I'd rather him end the season with like a 120 WRC plus than a 130, because that might be a sign that he faced some lefties and battled and was actually okay and gave you some confidence that maybe he's closer to an everyday guy. Seattle needs that. They don't have an everyday player at third. They don't have an everyday player in left necessarily. They don't have an everyday player in right necessarily. First base is a kind of influx. You have a short-term answer at second base. You need some guys that you control to be legitimate everyday answers moving forward. And if they give Canzone the opportunity, I think they should. I think they should give Raley the opportunity at some point as well. To hit some lefties and maybe stay in the lineup a little more than just kind of be a platoon timeshare sort of guy. I think it could be huge for this club moving forward. If you're telling me you're thinking about the 20-25 man roster, if you can pencil in Canzone basically every day, 450, 500 plate appearances at least at DH or in one of the corners in the outfield, that's huge. But if you can't, because you either didn't give him the opportunity or you did and he struggled, well, one, at least you know. But if you didn't give him the opportunity, you still don't know. You enter 2025 going, oh, maybe we should give him a chance now. You can do that this year. You could do that this year and then make some deals in July to cover for it, or start playing your guy in right field or left field against left-handed pitching, right? Dylan Moore. Yeah, I'll buy Dom Canzone. I think there's some upside there that people are going to like. I think what the numbers look like are going to depend on how much he faces lefties and then obviously how well he performs against lefties. Same exact thing for Luke Raley. But I have more confidence in Dom Canzone hitting lefties well enough to stay in the lineup against them some than I do Luke Raley. Just the swing is easier and shorter, and he doesn't open up, and it looks like he sees the ball better, and there's more bat speed there and all that good stuff. So, yeah, I would say Canzone's kind of that upside play this year that's kind of fun to watch, and the power is so easy too.
Right.
Like there's not a lot of effort in that swing considering how much power he's got. So I know he gained some weight and he's a better athlete than people give him credit for too. He's not a slug. He's not out there running like he's not Ty France on the bases, you know. Like what's been the joke like the last couple of years? Like he's a 6 on MLB The Show in speed or 11 or something like Dom Canzone's he's not that slow, you know. He's not a great defender, but he's not Ty France on the bases. So athleticism can help you in the batter's box too. Hitters will tell you that. Coaches will tell you that. Managers will tell you that. GMs will tell you that. It's not all about data. Sometimes it's the physical tools, and he's got them all. Absolutely has them all. So I saw somebody the other day say, hey, if you think Dom Canzone is going to like magically turn into like this 2 to 3 win player after what he's done, you know, the last year or two, like that's on you. And I'm like, what do you mean? Like this happens sometimes. It really does. Like, especially when the idea is a lack of opportunity. It's not like he's had 2 seasons where he had like 400 or 500 plate appearances and didn't do anything, right? Like he hasn't actually had the opportunity, which changes the equation for me. So yeah, I'm looking forward to Canzone. I'm looking, you know, I think at very least he's going to hit a couple of moonshots, right? Yeah. Like into the night, into the cold in April where nobody can feel their hands except Dom apparently. And he hits one 440 feet and people go crazy. Yeah, I think he's going to be a fun player to watch just because he can get the ball a long way. So I'm looking forward to that.
Whose stock are you buying in the rotation this year?
Logan Gilbert's my guy. I'm a Kirby guy ahead of Gilbert career-wise. I think Kirby ends up having a better career. I think he's going to be a better pitcher. But right now, the guy I think could take a jump is Logan Gilbert. I think last year what we saw from the splitter, that's the biggest thing for me. That's the biggest thing. In the spring, I don't look at numbers in the spring. I know he had a couple of outings there in a row in the last couple of weeks where he gave up like 4 runs each or something. It just didn't look great. But it looks to me like he's keeping his front shoulder closed a little more, which could help, you know, hide the ball a little bit, bring a little bit of that fastball value back. He's always thrown 95 plus, but throwing it in the zone when the hitter can see it, you know, and gets a good look at it, they're still going to hit it a little bit. And I think that's the biggest reason why Kirby jumped him, because I think right now Logan Gilbert's secondary stuff is better, and the progress he made with that splitter last year, that could be a difference maker. That's a legitimate swing and miss pitch. And he proved that some last year. I think it's just going to be better this year. And I think Logan Gilbert, I talked about this on my show the other day. If you're looking to extend somebody, you're looking to guess who the next guy to get extended is, it should be Logan Gilbert, just because of where he is in his career, the arbitration status, the first of 4. He's a year older. He's a year deeper into it than Kirby. Cal Raleigh situations, kind of being a catcher and being a little older. That's really tough to commit to a catcher beyond 30 at, you know, $20+ million a year. The easy one is Logan Gilbert. But if you wait, if you're the team and you wait because he won't engage or would rather wait because he's really feeling it, it's just going to cost you more money, because he could throw up a 5.5 win season this year. I think I'd be less surprised if Gilbert threw up a 5.5 win season and was a top 3 Cy Young finisher. I'd be less surprised at that than Julio being a top 3 MVP guy again this year. I'd be less surprised at that. Yeah.
So you're really buying stock. And I love that, because that like, I mean, everybody kind of looks at the rotation right now as they've got a really good starting 3, but I think people look at it as Castillo and Kirby and then Gilbert, where like Castillo and Kirby are really good, Castillo and Kirby are great. Logan Gilbert's really good. But you're saying like, okay, Logan Gilbert can get into the Castillo Kirby conversation this year. Like all 3 of those guys can finish top 7, 8 in Cy Young voting.
I think for 2024, at least where I sit right now, he's the guy with the most upside of those 3 in 2024. I think ultimately it's George Kirby, but that doesn't necessarily mean that's this year. I think Gilbert's just in a spot in his career with the development of that splitter last year, where I think he just takes a bigger step this year and is at least a win and a half better than he was. He was pretty inconsistent last year. I would totally understand if it was Kirby, Castillo, Gilbert again this year, that wouldn't surprise me, because that's the order it was last year. It was basically, Kirby and Castillo were great and Gilbert was really good. And that wouldn't surprise me again, because he probably has the most risk of those two from a performance standpoint. I just think he's going to turn a corner that we just haven't seen on a consistent basis yet. I think he's going to have fewer outings where it's 4 1/3, 4 runs, 3 walks, 3 strikeouts. I think he's going to have fewer of those outings, because if you go take out all 3 of those starters, like worst 5 starts, Gilbert probably has the better numbers, because his 5 worst starts were bad. And I think Castillo's worst 5 starts were probably second worst. Kirby just had so few of them. Like he probably only had 3 or 4 of them, and the other 2 had at least 5, where they gave up 4 or 5 runs in 4 innings. I just think Gilbert's the guy ready to take the next step. I think Castillo is what he is. But he's a guy who, and you guys remember this, when they made that trade, it was like, oh, the guy with the great changeup, and we haven't seen it, right? We really haven't seen it. But that's a pitch that comes and goes, right? Like you've talked to guys. It's a field pitch. The splitter can come and go sometimes. The changeup can come and go sometimes. Sometimes it's at bat to at bat. Sometimes it's inning to inning, game to game, season to season. What if Castillo just finds a way to feel that changeup a little more, changes the grip on it or something, and or does something different with it, and all of a sudden he's a 4-pitch guy again? Because when he's at his very, very best, his very most dominant, I would say anyway, where the strikeouts are up, he's got 3 pitches, and he could be a guy who has 4 above average pitches led by both of those fastballs. So you can't sleep on any of them. They could all be 5-win guys, but I just think Gilbert's the guy that's primed to take the biggest step forward this year.
Is that splitter the best off speed in that rotation?
Yeah, it probably is. Yeah, I think so. They all have good fastballs. Castillo has 2 good ones. Kirby has 2 good ones. Gilbert's got the best secondary stuff of all 3 of them, though. I think everybody would agree with that, even though the 2 breaking balls not consistent. But now that he's got the splitter in there, he's got the most complete arsenal, and at least as good a control as the other 2. Kirby's more of a command guy who can put it where he wants, and that's where tons of his value comes from. But yeah, that's a good point. It's probably the best off-speed pitch in that rotation, at least right now. Maybe Miller has something we haven't seen. Maybe his splitter develops too. But Brian Wu wasn't going to have it. That was my biggest question with him coming into the year. Does he have something that isn't 95 and moving left to right, that he can show a hitter and not get shelled by good lineups? And I don't think we saw that in the spring. We certainly didn't see it last year. So we'll see. That's interesting. You could probably ask the same question about the bullpen. Who's got the best with Brash and Soto out? Is it the Munoz slider? Is it by far the Munoz slider? Or does Stanek splitter come into play here?
What about Stanek's slider?
Yeah, he's got 2. Yeah.
Well, so we started to dive in on some Ryan Stanek stuff, and tell us what you think about this. So, like, the stuff plus on his slider is nuts. Now, it didn't get good results last year, but the pure stuff of it's good. I have a take out there that I put out on a couple podcasts since they signed him and said, don't be shocked, people, if the Mariners tap into Ryan Stanek's slider this year and it looks really good again. Because, like, the stuff's there. He just wasn't throwing it in the right spots. The Mariners are great at figuring that out with guys. Like, could it be Stanek's slider? Maybe.
It could be. Absolutely. And the same thing with relievers, with the volatility of their overall performance and their health comes with certain pitches too. There are some guys who avoid it, like Matt Brash, just because it's just so easy for him to spin the 2 breaking balls. You just assume that it's just going to be about, locating the pitch. Like he's always going to be able to get the high spin out of it in a late break. But yeah, Stanek's got like a couple of years ago, he wasn't as good last year overall as he was in 2022. But when you look at the results on his splitter, they can't lift it. They hit the ball on the ground a lot. They swing and miss at it like 47% of the time last year. So what if he has both pitches? What if he has the 2022 slider and the 2022-2023 splitter to go with, 98? I mean, doesn't that sound like one of the better relievers in the American League?
Yeah.
It's strange. And I know he doesn't pound the strike zone like some of the other Mariners guys have. He's a little more like Matt Brass than he is like a Gabe Spire last year, who just barely walked anybody. But it's not like he's walking the world either, And a couple of years ago, I think he only gave up, was it 2 home runs all year?
Yeah. Yeah, it was 2.
In Houston?
Yeah.
Like that's pretty remarkable. And so yeah, he's got two pitches that might end up being actually the best pitch in that bullpen. But did you guys get a look at Vargas when you were down in Arizona?
No,
Not much.
not really.
Yeah. So if he threw 10 sliders, cutter sliders, whatever, you know, they're 158 miles an hour. But are you guys in here? He throws 200 miles an hour with 158 mile an hour slide. That's what it feels like with standing behind the catcher. He was like 96 to 100, and it was pretty easy session. And when he throws that slider, I think he threw a couple at 89 early, and then they were 92, 93, 94. I think he threw a 95 mile an hour slider. I wanted to ask the catcher, but he got up and ran away. That's ridiculous. That's why I think StatCast called it a cutter last year. Mm-hmm. It's thrown so hard. But there was a couple of them that were clearly sliders. There's depth to it. There's two plane break. If he can throw strikes with his fastball, I mean, it's Andres Munoz. It's the same idea with more fastball value too. It's a different fastball than Munoz's fastball, better shape. So just if they can teach him to throw strikes, I'm glad they sent him down. They optioned him down. He's got stuff to work on. Mm-hmm. But man, can you imagine that guy throwing, you know, even if you just walk at 9-10% of the guys like Brash did last year, that's all you need. Just don't fall behind. Don't walk the bases loaded. Don't walk in runs. Be able to find it. Be able to grind through it. And they teach him to do that. And all of a sudden you have Stanek, you have Vargas, you have maybe Santos, maybe Brash. But even if you don't, you still have three guys at the back that can get anyone out in any situation. Yeah, all of a sudden that deal they made with Arizona looks a little bit better if you can get something decent out of Carlos Vargas later in the year.
I just think about a potential bullpen. If that situation pans out where Vargas really figures it out, and you've got the 5 righties with Vargas, Munoz, Brash, Santos, Stanek, you got the 2 lefties with Spire and Sauce, like that's 7 of your 8 bullpen spots of guys who are like legitimate, like either stud or very, very good relievers. Like this could be the best bullpen we've ever seen them assemble if everything works out.
Yeah. Man, I made the point a couple of weeks before they signed Stanek, they had $8.2 million invested in their bullpen. Mm-hmm. The Texas Rangers had $25 million and $10 million alone in David Robertson. The Astros, $60 million, guys. $60 million in that bullpen. You know, Hader and Abreu and Presley and Montero. They've got a ton, $60 million in that bullpen in 2024. And here's Jerry DiPono and Justin Hollander at the time with an $8 million freaking payroll. And I was like, I'm not sure the Astros bullpen's better. It probably is, but I'm not sure that it is. And that's freaking crazy. And if everybody's healthy, man, the 2 of the best bullpens in baseball, and one of them cost you, $12 million, and one of them cost you $60. Absolutely freaking crazy. Good Lord.
We've been trying to figure this out for this upcoming season. What do you think Andres Munoz needs to do to recapture that slider?
That's a good question, because it can be a lot of things. To me, the first thing I look at is mechanics. Is he doing something different? Is he doing something different just with the slider? Is he finishing in a different spot? Is the slot in a different? Is he giving the pitch away a little bit? Is he doing something to take the bite off it? And I'm sure they're going to, those are easy things for them to look at. They'll look at video. They'll hook them up to machines. They'll get the biomechanics of all of it. They'll ask him about it. They'll ask other pitchers about it. They'll certainly ask, Cal and Blake and Mitch and all the catchers. They'll ask them about it. Scott Service has a good eye for that sort of thing, especially being a catcher. And they'll figure it out. They'll look at film and see what's different. He's probably doing a lot of that on his own. There were times last year, maybe, I don't know what, maybe 15, 20% of the time where it was like, oh, there it is. There it is. And he throws it like 3 or 4 times, but then he'd lose it the next batter, or the next game it wouldn't look as great. And he was still good. He wasn't great, but he was still good last year. For me, the key for Munoz is to get more fastball value, and I think it might be throwing that 2-seamer a little more. If he can come in on hitters again, on lefties and righties with the fastball, the slider's completely different. And I think last year, and we're seeing this around the league, like the sweeping type slider, which sometimes I think sweeping doesn't necessarily really, I don't know. It's a sweeping slider, but I don't like the term. I don't like the fact that we're separating sweeping sliders from sliders that are a little more vertical. Where do you draw the line, right? Anyway, sliders are being chased less, and they're being hit more when they're thrown in the zone every year, like the last 5 years. So it might just be, can we do something a little different with the fastball to make everything else a little bit more valuable? We may be going back in the other direction to where it's slider, 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 to where it's slider, fastball, 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 slider, towards more of a setup to get to the slider instead of just being able to use the slider as much. Hitters are picking it up. Hitters are getting better. Hitters are catching up. This is the thing that I kept saying when they kept doing everything the league was doing was helping the hitter for like the last 5 years. All the rule changes, the 3-batter minimum, the limiting of visits to the mound, the baseballs, the doctoring, what the stuff, the sticky stuff that you could put on the ball. Everything was helping the hitter. And I was like, if you just give this like 5 or 10 years, not saying you shouldn't do anything right now, but you just give this 5 or 10 years, it's going to start turning back in the other direction. And then pitchers will have to catch up a little bit. And, it'll be 2035 and it'll be like, man, the league's got to do something. They got to raise the mound or something because these hitters just have it happens. We go in cycles. And it's not all just because of steroids. When you look at the 90s and early 2000s, hitters were just ahead of pitchers. Greg Maddux and Tom Glavine had a big influence on the 90s and 2000s, coming in the league in the late 80s and painting, and that's what pitchers wanted to do. And the hitters were like, yeah, but if you do that, you're only throwing 91. I'm going to hit 91. And then all of a sudden, pitchers were like, I need to throw 95 then. And for the next 20 years, everybody's trying to throw 95 to 100, and here we are with a bunch of sliders, and here we are. Everything's power, power, power. And we're starting to go back in the other direction where you have to put the pitch where you really want to put the pitch, and the fastball has to be a bigger part of it. I think that's the direction we're headed in. So maybe that's the answer for Munoz. But if you've had it once, you can get it again. I believe in that. I'm big on that. So I don't know what they have to do. I haven't really studied that. That's going to be something the team can figure out. But he's still going to be good because he didn't have it really last year consistent. He was still pretty good. So we'll see what happens. But Munoz is still your dude, right? You got to get one out in any game, including when Brash is healthy, including when Santos healthy. You're going to Munoz. Lefty or righty, you're going to Munoz, right? Yeah. I would. Yeah. If Juan Soto's at the plate, I'm not going to Spire or Sauce. I like Sauce, but I'm not going on it. I'm going to Munoz. I want 100 all over. I want him to think about both fastballs, and I want him to think about that slider. And Munoz, to me, has the best chance of getting him out. So I still think he's one of the best, the best 10 or 12 relievers in baseball, even last year with the version of that pitch that he had a year ago. I'm curious though. I'm curious what the team thinks about specifically, like kind of holistically, about Miller adding the splitter, Kirby adding the splitter, Gilbert adding the splitter, and why that hasn't happened in the bullpen more with their younger guys. Why they haven't said, hey, Andres, you want to try a splitter? Maybe they have done it, but we haven't seen them take that forward. We saw Brash try a cutter and it didn't stick. Mm-hmm. I'm curious as to why that hasn't happened. I'm wondering if Ryan Stanek, having such a good one, influences some of the pitchers in the Mariners bullpen to maybe try that pitch at some point. Because if you're telling me Munoz is 96 to 100 and he's got even a 55 slider that's 90 miles an hour and he's got a 50 splitter that's 90 miles an hour, I quit. Mm-hmm. I quit. That's it. You got to be kidding me. Yeah, that's what he'd be one of the 5 best relievers in baseball with that profile.
Oh yeah.
Without question. Yeah.
100%. If we had a couple more for you, I know as we start to wind this down, this is kind of going to tie into a little bit of a prospect thing. And this is me kind of grabbing. What's that?
What's a prospect, by the way? Help me out.
I don't know. The term, the baseball coin for minor league players.
I love it, dude. You said, I don't know.
Yeah, like I'm just going by the dictionary here, Jason. Don't shoot the messenger.
We go by what older generations have taught us, Jason, which you are of that.
Oh, so I'm the enforcer though, so I'll take that. Cool prospect stuff, love it, absolutely. Talk about it every day.
Okay, so I would say this is the guy that's probably most likely of all the prospects to debut this year. We've talked about it. Like there is some outside chance that Cole Young could get up to Seattle at the end of September if he has a great year and the team's in it. I'm going to throw that aside for now. And the guy I actually think is most likely to get up. If Tyler Locklear continues to just crush the baseball in the minors, how do they manage that? Because you've got Ty France at first, you've got Mitch Garver as your full-time DH, and I don't think either of those guys, or any of those 3 guys, can really play third base. So if Locklear forces the hand this year, like what do they do?
I don't think Locklear is capable of forcing their hand, because to me, forcing the hand is like, because you look at what he did in Double-A last year. I just pulled up his numbers. So I just didn't want you guys to think I memorized this, because I did not. So in Double-A last year, it was 22 games. It was under 100 plate appearances. But there was nothing special about what he did, right?
Mhm.
260, 383 with a 403 slug. There's nothing there that tells you, wow, right? So in Everett, it was a little different, but that was a 22-year-old in high A that played college ball, playing in a home ballpark that, for a guy that has power from line to line, like that 305, 422, 549 line with 12 homers in 60 games, like you should expect that. So I'm not down on Locklear, but I think there's a lot less chance of him kind of blowing it up like that and forcing the Mariners' hand, as you put it, than Cole Young, to be honest with you. Because to me, I look at it this way. Cole Young has to convince the Mariners that that as long as they're still competing and they're in the thick of it, they're legitimately in the thick. Cole Young has to beat out Luis Urias and Josh Rojas, not Ty France. Ty Locklear has to beat out Ty France or Mitch Garver. That's going to be really difficult to do. So the bar is a lot higher for Locklear to do that, right? Like he's got to mash and put up numbers and hit velocity and hit the breaking ball. Because remember that, like, the Mariners have had a hit and miss record, mostly miss, but Julio came straight from Double-A, was totally fine. Kyle Lewis came straight from Double-A, was totally fine. Everybody else they've done that with has struggled. Evan White struggled. Jared Kelnick struggled. Had to send him back down. Cal Raleigh struggled. Had to send him back down. Like, it's more miss than hit. Locklear doesn't strike me as Kyle Lewis or like advanced as Kyle Lewis, bat speed like Kyle Lewis, cover the zone like Kyle Lewis, even though there's more swing and miss in Kyle Lewis. And Locklear certainly doesn't strike me as closer to being like Julio than he does to Evan White and Cal Raleigh and Jared Kelnick, right? There's some swing and miss in his game, but it's about, can I get to everything? And he struggles with stuff in, so he's got some questions to answer. I'm not predicting a bad year. I think it's just going to be harder. The bar is really high for him. And I won't put stats on it, but he's going to have to be really consistent for a good 3+ months. And Ty France is like one of those guys going to have to get hurt, or Ty France or Mitch Garver is going to have to struggle mightily for them to make a switch like that. And then what do you do with that player, right? I think that was kind of part of what you're asking.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know what you do with that player. If it's not an injury, you're not cutting Ty France, right? And if he's hitting poorly, he's going to be really tough to trade. Somebody might take a shot at him. You want to split the rest of the contract with someone, send $1 million or $2 million with $3 or $4 million that's left on Ty's deal in June or July. You might be able to get a flyer on a Double-A guy or something. You might non-tender him at the end of the year anyway if he's not hitting, and then call up Tyler. But you're going to have to be convinced that Locklear is ready to hit major league pitching. So in that scenario, if we're building a scenario where Ty France has been like basically an average hitter, kind of like what he was last year, and you think Tyler Locklear can be more, you're going to have to be convinced that Tyler Locklear for half a season is going to be at least that, maybe more, and where his floor is at least as high as Ty France's too. Because if you get rid of Ty France and Locklear struggles, then what do you do, right? If you were able to call Locklear up and keep France on the roster, that's a different story, because then you give him some looks, and if he struggles, you send him back down, you go back to Ty France. It doesn't seem like that's a scenario that's a tough one to kind of play out in my head. I think Cole Young has just as good a chance, maybe a better chance, to get to the big leagues and to beat Tyler Locklear to the big leagues. Other than relievers, those probably are the two guys, though, I would imagine. Mm-hmm. Like, that's got to be the first two guys on the list. I mentioned something when I wrote my prospect piece, my rankings piece earlier, that and I still believe this. I think Cole Emerson, he's not going to beat those guys to the big leagues, but he's going to beat Tyler Locklear to his sticking point. And what I mean by that is Locklear might be one of those guys that goes up and down a couple of times, like Cal Raleigh did, like Jared Kelnick had to do. I don't think Colt Emerson's going to have to be that. I would bet that at 21 years old, Colt Emerson sees the big leagues and doesn't have to go back.
I like that answer.
Yeah,
I like that answer about Colt Emerson. Like, people are high on Colt Emerson. Like, we just talked to Jim Callis and he was saying similar things. It's like, man, I like this player.
Yeah.
It's exciting.
Yep. And he could end the year in high A Everett, and kind of be on the Cole Young track. But man, I don't know. Like, I did get the impression they were going to start him in Modesto, but I also got the impression that 2 weeks ago they weren't sure, which tells me they really believe. And if you're telling me they're even 5% of them is considering sending Colt Emerson, who has like 5 minutes in the minors, at 19 years old to Everett, to high A, to basically start his first full pro season out of high school. Remarkable. Yeah. He does a lot of things really, really well. A lot of fun. Him and Cole Young are both fun. Harry Ford isn't really that fun to watch, but I think he might be the most underrated prospect in the system, because even if he's a 40 catcher, if you get hit 260 with some on base and 15 homers, what are you? You're a catcher. They're going to deal with the below average catching because you're a pretty good asset in the lineup. And I think teams are going to value that quite a bit. I think Seattle's going to value that. I think there's this thing going around. I don't know how you guys feel about this, that Harry Ford is the most likely of the top 5-10 to get traded. And while that's probably true, I think there's a less chance of it happening than some people think. There's a lot of conversation going on that it's as close to a sure thing as can be. And I don't think that's true. I think there are questions about how long Cal Raleigh's going to be the number one catcher. I think there's at least a little bit, not that you don't want him to, but what's it going to take to keep him here? Do you want to just take him up to his free agency? Does he want to do that? I don't want to say maybe he gets disgruntled, but if he's not going to be happy and he doesn't want to sign long-term, do you trade him and get something and stick with Harry Ford and hope he can take over in a year or two behind the plate and get a boatload in return for Cal Raleigh? That has to be on the table at some level if you're the Mariners at this point, because you can't know that Raleigh's going to stay here. And if trading him 2 years before free agency is better for your team now and in the future, you can fill a hole. You have to get Harry Ford to a point where you think he's a fringe average or better catcher, though. Just overall hitting, and get him to that point, then you can make a decision on it. But I don't think that decision's been made. I don't think it's that obvious that Harry Ford's not going to be here long term. God, that system's fun.
Does it get made this year?
That's a good question. I think what could change that whole equation is a team calls and says, yeah, we do think Ford's going to be able to catch. It's going to take him another year, but we do believe it, and we do like the bat enough, and we're going to give you X, value for him in a deal, and here's a player that you really want. That could totally change. But that's probably true to a lesser extent with everybody, including Emerson and Young at the top of that system, or even Celestin. Ford's the easiest for them to trade away, considering, the team needs coming up, but it really just depends on where you can get. If I can get in exchange for Dom Canzone and I don't know, Carlos Vargas and Harry Ford and Laz Montez, if I can get 4 years of a 130 or better WRC plus right fielder or third baseman, I'm doing it. You know what I mean? Yeah. Like, you're trying to win right now, and hoarding prospects can't be the way. So it just really depends on what becomes available. And that's something I've been digging into quite a bit the last week or two, because these prospects are getting to the point where they're ripe to be traded, because they're almost to that point where they're, is he 2 weeks away from the big leagues? Is he 2 months away from the big leagues? And that's when teams want to pounce on players. So it's going to be really interesting to see what happens this summer.
Jason, we really appreciate your perspective on all things and appreciate all the time you give us. I mean, these are now 2 awesome conversations we've had leading into a season, and it is just amazing. You do great work, and we appreciate you taking some time to join us here today, always.
Well, I appreciate that. You guys do fun stuff too. Anytime somebody asks me for recommendations, I say that depends on what you're looking for. But if you're looking for a mix of fun stuff and, like, people that dig into, stuff, I've certainly pointed them your way too. So I appreciate what you guys do as well. It's unique, I think, in this market, what you guys do. So that makes it fun and valuable. And you guys are easy to talk to, and we're starting to get to know each other. So it makes it really, really easy. So I love talking baseball. So please don't come to Mercer Island and find me, because we'll end up sitting somewhere for 2 hours and I'll never get anything done. So that's the way I think about some folks, and you guys are certainly in that bucket. So appreciate your guys' time. Yeah, anytime.
Well, it's like we always say, we always love talking to Jason Churchill. It's been really fun to have him on the podcast now as a recurring guest. It's always fun to talk to him right before the season starts. And hopefully that gave you guys a lot of information on the Mariners going into 2024. I think we're all excited. I think we're all ready for the season to start. And that's always a fun tune-up conversation with Jason. That will just about wrap up this edition of the Marine Layer podcast. You guys know the drill. If you want to listen to the full form podcast, you can do so wherever you get your audio pods. Make sure to download our episodes, leave a 5-star review, leave a written review too. It all helps us out a ton. Go like, comment, subscribe on YouTube, and follow us on social media, where we're on Instagram, on TikTok, on Twitter, and on YouTube Shorts at Marine Layer Pod. That's TJ. I'm Lyle. As always, we thank you guys for tuning in. We'll talk to you soon.